Again, when he says meditation, remember he really means presence. Meditation is the emptying the mind of all thought. For thought and feeling dissipate energy. They are repetitive, producing mechanical activities which are a necessary part of existence, but they are only part, and thought and feeling cannot possibly enter into the immensity of life. Quite a different approach is necessary. Not the path of a habit, association, and the known. There must be freedom from these. One of the most accessible books by Krishnamurti is called Freedom from the Known. If you haven't read any, that's a very good book to start. Freedom from the Known. And here he talks about it again. What does that mean? It means to be able to step out of thought, because thought is the known. Thought is knowledge. So freedom from the known is really also means freedom from thought. Meditation is the emptying of the mind of the known. It cannot be done by thought or by the hidden prompting of thought, nor by desire in the form of prayer, nor through the self-effacing hypnotism of words, images, hopes and vanities. All these have to come to an end easily, without effort and choice, in the flame of awareness. And there, walking on that road, there was complete emptiness of the brain, and the mind was free of all experience, the knowing of yesterday, though 1,000 yesterdays have been. Time, the thing of thought, had stopped. Literally, there was no movement before and after. There was no going or arriving or standing still. Space as distance was not. There were the hills and bushes, but not as high and low. There was no relationship with anything, but there was an awareness of the bridge and the passer-by. The totality of the mind, in which is the brain with its thoughts and feelings, was empty. And because it was empty, there was energy, a deepening and widening energy without measure. All comparison, measurement belonged to thought, and so to time. The otherness was the mind without time. It was the breath of innocence and immensity. Words are not reality. They are only means of communication, but they are not the innocence and the immeasurable. The emptiness was alone. And in between readings, as we're not waiting for anything, just notice the stillness here, within and without. Just acknowledge it. There's stillness. Giving it attention. And already it deepens. If you give it attention, if you just notice it, it deepens. And then it becomes, you can sense there's a power within it. It is power itself, of course, because it is the essence of all life. Another thing in the middle of the night here, his favorite time. A deep-throated owl was hooting in the hills. Its deep voice penetrated the room and quickened hearing. Except for these hoots, everything was still. There was not even the croak of a frog or the rustle of some passing animal. The silence intensified between the hoots, which came from the southern hills. They filled the valley and the hills, and the air throbbed with the call. It wasn't answered for a very long time, and when it came, it was way down the valley to the west. Between them, they held the silence and the beauty of the night. Dawn would come presently, but now it was dark. You could see the outlines of the hill and that huge banyan tree. The Pleiades and Orion were setting in a clear, cloudless sky. The air was fresh by a short shower of rain. It had a perfume that comes of old trees, rain, flowers, and very ancient hills. Now, to express this, he uses these words: to see wholly, A-W-H-O, holy, totally. To see wholly, the brain has to be in a state of negation. Negation is not the opposite of the positive. All opposites are related within the fold of each other. Negation has no opposite. The brain has to be in a state of negation for total seeing. It must not interfere with its evaluations and justifications, with its condemnations and defenses. It has to be still, not made still by compulsion of any kind, for then it is a dead brain, merely imitating and conforming. When it is in a state of negation, it is choicelessly still. Only then is there total seeing. In this total seeing, which is the quality of the mind, there is no seer, no observer, no experiencer. There is only seeing. The mind then is completely awake. In this fully wakened state, there is no observer and the observed. There is only light, clarity. The contradiction and conflict between the thinker and thought ceases. So what he talks about, what he calls negation, is the voluntary embracing of, could say, the relinquishing of thought when it's not required. So if that power grows in you, the power to relinquish thought when it's not required, then, of course, you are fulfilling your purpose for being here, which is the awakening of consciousness. And whatever you do when you are connected with that vast spaciousness within you can then become empowered, because you're no longer acting from egoic self and its desires, what it thinks it needs to feel more happy, to feel more complete, fulfilled. You're not acting from those desires anymore. You're acting not as a separate entity, but this very power acts through you, and anything that you then undertake as action, whether it's speaking or doing, has a power to it, because it's in alignment with what the universe wants. It's not the little me that thinks it's a separate entity. This is what I want. And so it becomes empowered. Your life becomes empowered, becomes an expression of that. But you have to find that place of power first. You have to go deeply into it and realize your oneness with it. When we talk about it in words, we all will create always a duality, as if there was you and the power. Ultimately, that the power is the essence of who you are. So it's really finding knowing who you are, and then realizations come, even interesting thoughts may come that weren't there before, because that's where inspiration comes from. Empowerment comes from the source. But you're not doing it as a means to an end, then it doesn't work. You go there not because you want to become successful in the world. That's not the true relinquishing. It is in itself the most satisfying thing there can be. It is already fulfilling, so that it's not made into a means to an end. And whatever else then happens is the icing on the cake, to coin a phrase. Whatever else happens is added on to you. It comes out of that power. It reflects that, or as I said just earlier, it's the diluted power that becomes whatever is here in the life of form. Now, probably the books that came through me and the teaching that comes through me, that could not have happened if I had not spent probably 10 years mostly being still. That was my main activity. I would, yes, occasionally talk to people, occasionally do some counseling, but vast spaces of my life were just emptiness. And the depths grew, the emptiness intensified. And then 10 years or so passed, and then I knew that this could express itself in a more in this world. There was a function that was meant to happen through me, that this power wasn't actually not reaching many people. And then one day, perhaps I should have done it earlier, but probably the 10 years were necessary. I've told this little story before. I went to a little village church in Somerset, near where I lived. One of these ancient churches you find in English villages, like 600 years old or 700, or even going back to Norman times. And there was nobody in there, and there I just said, it's time for acceleration, or I would like acceleration. And then nothing happened. A few months passed. I had forgotten that I'd asked for acceleration. And then suddenly I woke up and realized I have to leave England. And I have to move to the west coast of North America. Don't know why, but I had to do it. So the energy was too strong. And then when I arrived after a few weeks on the west coast, the power of now started to come through. And then it grew, and then the writing stream became more and more empowered, and I realized that was the acceleration. And I didn't realize it was only the beginning, and so it went on and on. And then the acceleration took on other forms, and at some point the acceleration took on the form of opera. And that was all, it was almost breathless, so be careful with what you ask for, especially if you contact the place of power. You can ask for, if you're not in touch with essence, you can ask for many things. You're lucky if you get a few, but if you're in touch with essence, you can ask, but what you ask for in essence corresponds to, it's not egoic anymore. It comes from the essence, so that's good, because otherwise you could create havoc if the ego could get in there. But if the ego is there, the essence isn't there. If the essence is there, the ego is either absent or just remnants are still floating around. So Krishnamurti, he often wondered where, he had a strange perception that the power would sometimes come into him, and then at other times it left him. So he would sometimes say, he was not continuously connected with it, but he would sometimes say, oh, it's gone now. And he became kind of childlike. Where's it gone? It's not there now. But he had this... and then suddenly it came back, and the moment he gave talks, it would be there very powerfully. And he didn't understand it, because nobody can understand it. He couldn't figure out, what is this power? What does it want? Well, it's doing already what it wants. We cannot fully comprehend it through the mind. Here's a little piece where he's walking around Rome, and I think he's walking down the Spanish Steps, which you know if you have seen Rome, this famous staircase. Walking along the pavement is British for sidewalk, by the way. Walking along the pavement, overlooking the biggest basilica, and down the famous steps to a fountain and many picked flowers of so many colors. I suppose there were stalls selling flowers. Crossing the crowded square, we went along a narrow one-way street, quiet with not too many cars. There, in that dimly lit street with a few unfashionable shops, suddenly and most unexpectedly, that otherness came with such intense tenderness and beauty that one's body and brain became motionless. So he's walking along, and suddenly he goes, an intensification of presence, which perhaps presence was already there before in the background. But then when he talks about otherness, presence comes in so strongly that it almost obliterates everything else. Suddenly and most unexpectedly, that otherness came with such intense tenderness and beauty that one's body and brain became motionless. For some days now, it had not made its immense presence felt. It was there vaguely in the distance, a whisper. But there the immense was manifesting itself, sharply and with waiting patience. Thought and speech were gone, and there was peculiar joy and clarity. It followed down the long narrow street till the roar of traffic and the overcrowded pavement swallowed us all. It was a benediction that was beyond all image and thought. There was great bliss, a great ecstasy that perished at the touch of thought. And of course it was that is the place out of which the teaching, we call it Krishnamurti's teaching, but of course it's not a person's teaching, that is out of which that powerful stream that came through him, that was the very foundation for it, that was the source from which it came. But it could have manifested, the power could have manifested in itself in other ways. If he had been an artist, it could have manifested in that way. If he had been a scientist even, it could have manifested as sudden, deep insights, not arrived at through analytical thinking, in the same way that it came to Einstein and very few of the great scientists. The great leap forward. Yes, analytical thinking is necessary, especially if you're a scientist. But if the great breakthroughs to occur even in science, there's a leap from analytical thinking to realization, which can sometimes be verified later through further analytical thinking or research, as was the case with Einstein's theory of relativity. But the realization came because Einstein was a person who was familiar with the states of stillness. He was so still, even in his childhood, that his parents thought he was retarded, that he was so slow. So it can flow into anything. It flows into you meet other humans, then suddenly this dimension flows into your speaking and your actions. So the ego asked, how can I become more powerful? And of course the unfortunate answer is, you have to die first and then the power is there. The ego, of course, being the mind-made sense of self, the me that always is needy and insufficient and always feels there's something not right here. It's okay, but there's something still missing. My life isn't complete. Can't be it. Or it feels there's something. Either it feels there's something lacking or there's something wrong. And it doesn't necessarily mean that the mind says there's something wrong here. No, it's an underlying, unspoken feeling or assumption that there's something wrong. Very common. You might, if you're very, very alert, you might detect it in yourself still occasionally, that you walk around life and there's always, there are moments, of course, that are fine, and then quickly again, something it's not complete. It never is, because and that sense of incompleteness does not arise from conditions. It arises, it's a state of consciousness that's incomplete. Because conditions are always changing, they can never bring you to any kind of completion. No matter what you go or what you achieve or where you go, you never find that sense of, I made it. If you do, you'll see it's a delusion very quickly. So the delusion comes to people occasionally, I've made it, and then you see, oh, this thing that I thought was my great achievement that made me happy has created a whole new set of problems. That wasn't meant to happen. So the making it is already the source of new problems. So life never leaves you alone, and it's not in itself, it's never that satisfying. Sorry. It's not satisfying if you're looking to it as your source of satisfaction, then it's not satisfying. If it is satisfying, however, if you are not looking to the conditions of your life for your source of satisfaction, because the satisfaction is in the presence, in the beingness, in the aliveness that you said, hence within yourself, the essence, identity, at this very moment. That is the satisfaction. And then the conditions of your life and whatever your life situation is actually quite enjoyable. Not that there are no problems. Yes, challenges are, but since you do not demand that life should be free of challenges and should really be here to make you happy, if you don't demand that anymore, then it's actually fine. The happiness is prior to all that. The true happiness is prior to things around you that come and go, or that you achieve or not achieve. So in a way to become tired of life, because you see, it's whatever I do, nothing seems to be working. Or it's not because it's a erroneous expectation. And then miraculously things actually improve externally. But first comes find yourself first. That's what it all. Krishnamurti never had really a spiritual teacher. It just happened to him. And I believe it didn't happen when he was chosen as a young boy by the Theosophical Society. The Theosophical Society was very popular early 20th century, founded in England. They had branches in India. They wanted to bring spirituality back to the West and bring Eastern spirituality to the West, and they were very much into channeling spirits and so spirit guides. And they had been told that they had to look for a vehicle for the future Buddha, Maitreya, or the Christ. So they got this message from their spirit guides. So the founders of Theosophy, and so one of the men who was in charge of Theosophy, he was in India, in their branch in India, and he walked around the beach, and he saw this boy walking on the beach, maybe 12 years old or like that. And he looked at the boy, and he said, "This boy has an incredible aura." He could see auras. And then he called others from the Theosophical Society and said, "Look at him." I said, "Yeah, maybe." But other people didn't see it at all because the boy looked so stupid. The boy looked like kind of a completely vacant mind. But he insisted, no, he may be the vehicle for the Maitreya. We can prepare him, and in 10 years or so, the Maitreya will come into him. That was their belief. And so they took, that was Krishnamurti, the boy. They took him, they had negotiations with his parents, he was finally adopted by them. They brought him to England. And then he was in all the newspapers already. The future Buddha is here, has arrived at Charing Cross Station. And then they founded an order for him, the Order of the Star of India, whatever it was called. There was properties, there was a huge castle they bought in the Netherlands, and Krishnamurti was given an education with private teachers, always surrounded by wealthy English men and many women. And he was always dressed impeccably, went to the best tailors in London, And then when he was in his, I believe, his late 20s, the moment was getting closer when the Buddha would come into him. And one day he suddenly, in a speech he gave to a big congregation, he said, "This is it. I'm walking out of here. I don't want anything to do with this anymore. I don't want to be the Maitreya. The truth is a pathless land. There is no way to it." And he walked away from it all. And then, of course, everybody was totally disappointed. The Theosophical Society, their lives had collapsed. Oh my God, what happened? But a few people kind of still were around him. And then his decisive shift came to Krishnamurti when his brother died of an illness fairly young. And then there was suddenly a surrender that happened in him. And then he started giving talks on a small scale, no longer as the great Maitreya, just as a person. And so the paradox is that he became a world teacher because he had denied. The original intention was to make him into a world teacher, but he denied that, and then he became a world teacher. But never claiming any kind of power for himself. So see if you can invite that state of that spacious state of presence into your life as much as possible in daily life, where thinking subsides and there's just a space of clarity, of awareness. That's the most important thing in your life. Nothing is more important than that. It's amazing that that's still very much a secret, in the sense that nobody seems to know that. Very few people seem to know that that's even possible. But it is for you, otherwise you wouldn't be here. There may be still a few million on the planet for whom it's not yet possible, but that's fine. We have to start somewhere. So it can be expressed in a negative way. Most of the time Krishnamurti uses negative teaching, like the Buddha. This is the least negative. By negative I mean he does not give you anything inspiring to believe in. He just wants to remove the obstacles to that state of presence or awareness, so you become aware of the obstacles in you. Like the Buddha. The Buddha didn't say, the kingdom of heaven is here now, or whatever. Or the Buddha just talked about emptiness, which is a negative thing. It's not, you can't believe in emptiness. You can believe in a kingdom of heaven. And of course, most likely you think it's somewhere, but not here. So it becomes something very inspiring, more inspiring than emptiness. We can't believe in it. I believe in emptiness. It's not inspiring. That's why we call that negative teaching. It just removes everything from you. But emptiness, of course, is just one word, which does not, there's no word that absolutely embraces the totality of it. Obviously, he speaks of presence. So when I say presence, presence is a positive statement. When I say the freedom from thinking is a negative statement. Not in a conventional sense, but in the negative, it points of removing something. And then whatever is there when you remove something, you don't need to talk about, because you need to know it for yourself, so that you don't need to talk about it. So I use both. I use the negative and the positive. So I speak of the power of presence, and sometimes I speak of the cessation of thinking, finding the gap between two thoughts. Same thing, just expressed or approached from a different angle. Now, at first, when you're not thinking, perhaps while you're taking a few steps, for example, you're walking from one end of the room to the other at home. That's a good opportunity for practicing not thinking.